Bolt fam, brace yourself. There's a behind-the-scenes detail that could quietly put more ammo in our 2026 draft without most people even noticing. And that kind of thing changes the board. At the same time, there's a "don't even say it" name in Las Vegas being floated around the division. And if that door ever cracks open, the AFC West feels it immediately. On offense, there's an idea out there that sounds insane until you look at the price tag and picture what it could do for Justin Herbert. And then on the coaching side, a couple key pieces are staying. Continuity that fans love to overlook until it matters most in November and January. Do you trust this direction? Tap like, subscribe, and stick with me to the end, because one of these stories ties the other three together. If you blinked, Joe Ortiz might have stolen a draft pick for us. And the wild part is, at the time it looked like a random move. Here's the reality. Going into the 2026 draft with only 5 picks is not where you want to be when you've got question marks across the roster and a long list of internal free agents to sort out. And we already spent some capital. The Chargers sent a 7th-round pick to the Titans for Elijah Molden at the end of training camp in 2024. Then later, they shipped a 5th-round pick in this upcoming draft to the Ravens, along with veteran safety Alohi Gilman, to bring in edge rusher Odafe Owe in a mid-season trade. So yeah, every extra pick matters now. Every single one. That's where compensatory picks come into play. The comp formula awards extra draft selections to teams that lose more qualifying free agents than they sign in a given offseason. And it's not vibes, it's based on contract value, playing time, and season awards or honors. There's also a key timing rule. The system only counts free agents who were on expiring deals and signed before the first Monday after the draft. Guys who sign later, or players who hit the market after being released, don't count against the formula in the same way. Ortiz came up through Baltimore, and the Ravens have been living in the compensatory pick world for years to build depth and keep the draft pipeline flowing. So he pulled a chess move that didn't look like a big deal at first. After the draft, the Chargers used the rarely used unrestricted free agent tender on running back J.K. Dobbins. In plain English, that tender gives the team exclusive negotiating rights with the player until a specific off-season deadline if he hasn't signed elsewhere. But more importantly for this conversation, it can make that player count toward the compensatory pick formula even after the draft. And then the dominoes fell. Dobbins signed with the Broncos after the Chargers applied that tender, which opened the door for him to count in the formula if he played enough snaps or earned an award. According to Over the Cap's compensatory pick chart, Dobbins cleared the snap threshold to be considered. That detail matters because before that, the Chargers were projected to get nothing. Look at the math. The Chargers initially lost 3 qualifying free agents: Josh Palmer, Poona Ford, and Christian Fulton. They signed 3 qualifying free agents: Dante Jackson, Mekhi Becton, and Najee Harris. 3 lost, 3 signed. Clean cancel out, 0 comp picks. But with Dobbins now counting as an additional loss because of the tender situation and his snap count in Denver, the math shifts to 4 lost and 3 signed. That makes Christian Fulton's value available for compensation. And now the Chargers are projected to receive a 6th-round compensatory pick for losing cornerback Christian Fulton to the Kansas City Chiefs. A 6th-rounder isn't glamorous, but it's another dart to throw in a draft where depth is going to matter, especially when you're trying to patch holes while a coaching staff is being reshaped. And I'm going to push you on this. If Ortiz is finding picks in the couch cushions, what happens if the front office decides to swing big on a move that shocks the division? Because there's a name that, just hearing it, makes Raiders fans tense up and Chargers fans do that nervous laugh. Max Crosby. Yeah, I said it. It sounds impossible. Division rival. Face of their defense. The kind of player you don't want to see twice a year and you definitely don't want to hand to a team in your own backyard. But if Crosby's name is going to live in trade rumor territory all offseason, we have to talk about the idea being floated. And the question becomes less, is this crazy? And more, what if it ever became real? The setup comes from an ESPN idea that pitched a possible deal. Raiders get a 2026 second-round pick, number 55 overall, a 2026 6th-round pick, and a 2027 5th-round pick, and the Chargers get edge Max Crosby. On paper, it's not pocket change, but it's also not the kind of Godfather haul you'd expect for a star pass rusher. That alone is enough to light up the comment section. Emotionally, you already know what Crosby represents. Constant pressure, relentless motor. He changes protections, he changes game plans. He turns 3rd and long into panic for quarterbacks. Put a player like that into your building, and suddenly every AFC West matchup feels different. That's the appeal. But here's the thing. The real cost isn't just the picks. Crosby's current deal runs out in 2026, and the extra years from 2027-29 are void years. Any team trading for him is almost certainly talking extension, new money, long-term commitment. That affects everything else. Cap flexibility, roster building, how you handle your own guys. And that's where the Chargers situation matters. Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh are free agents. So if you're thinking like the ESPN angle, you could argue, instead of waiting to see what happens with Mack and Oweh, you go land Crosby and lock in a cornerstone edge. But then you're staring at the other side of the equation. Draft capital is already limited, and you still need to keep building around Herbert on offense. Plus, let's be real, the Raiders trading a player like Crosby to a division rival is hard to imagine. Even in a rebuild, that's a line most teams don't want to cross. So while the pick value might be in the ballpark compared to past star edge trades, think about the 2022 Khalil Mack deal, where the Chargers sent a 2nd and a 6th. Getting the Raiders and Chargers to actually shake hands on Crosby feels like a stretch. And that's why, for the Chargers, the priority probably stays the same. Keep your draft capital and focus on retaining Oweh and Mack. Maybe this only becomes more than a thought experiment if the Chargers somehow let both Mack and Oweh walk. But right now, that seems pretty unlikely. Still, just having Crosby's name connected to the Chargers tells you something. The league is looking at this roster and this cap situation and saying, they could take a big swing. And if you're talking big swings, you can't stop at defense, because there's another idea out there on offense that could raise the ceiling fast. Think about this for a second. A move that sounds crazy when you first hear it, then you sit with it, you look at the numbers, and you start picturing Justin Herbert throwing a high ball in the back of the end zone to a guy who just wins contested catches. That's where A.J. Brown enters the conversation. And no, nothing is confirmed here. It's a mock trade concept put together by Tyler Sullivan at CBS Sports. An option, not a decision. But the fact that it even exists is enough to get Bolt fam debating. The floated deal has the Chargers sending a 2026 3rd-round pick and a 2026 6th-round pick to Philadelphia for A.J. Brown and a 2027 7th-round pick coming back. Be honest, your first reaction is probably, wait, that's it? Because we're talking about a receiver who, even in what was framed as a slightly limited season, still put up 1,003 yards, 78 catches, and 7 touchdowns on 121 targets. That's real production. That's a real weapon. But the trade cost isn't the whole story. Brown would carry a $23 million cap hit in 2026. That's significant. That forces decisions. And then there's the other part that splits fan bases everywhere. The baggage around his presence in the locker room. This isn't about talent. Nobody argues that. It's about fit, culture, chemistry, the stuff you can't measure on a stat sheet. Now imagine the football side of it. If you add a player like A.J. Brown, the field opens up. Defenses can't cheat as aggressively. Suddenly your red zone looks different. Your chunk play potential looks different. And it can change how you deploy Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston. More balance, more stress on corners and safeties, more answers when defenses try to take away your first read. Herbert gets a true go-win target. And that's the kind of thing that can turn a good offense into one that's built for a playoff run. The downside is obvious. The Chargers aren't loaded with picks. They're missing their 5th and 7th this year. If you swap a 6th and lose a 3rd, you're tightening your flexibility even more. You're basically saying, we're willing to be handicapped in the draft for an immediate star. Maybe you recoup something through another trade. Maybe not. Either way, it's a very real trade-off. Let me say this. If the Chargers have a chance to walk out of the offseason with a true difference maker on offense, even at the cost of flexibility, they have to seriously consider it. You don't get endless years of Herbert in his prime without paying for it somewhere. But while fans argue about stars and picks, there's a quieter fight happening behind the scenes that can decide whether any of this offensive potential actually hits full speed, or stalls before it ever takes off. Here's where championships get built. Continuity. Talent wins Sundays, but continuity wins January. And while most people only pay attention to new hires, the Chargers made a move that protects the core of the offense. Wide receivers coach Sanjay Lal and quarterbacks coach Shane Day are staying in Los Angeles, per ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. That might not sound like a headline, but inside a building, it can be massive. Start with Shane Day. His return in 2024 was something Justin Herbert fought for. That's not a casual endorsement. Quarterbacks don't go to bat like that unless the relationship is real. Herbert trusts him, trusts the communication, trusts the preparation. And with Mike McDaniel coming in to structure the offense, having that anchor matters. You can install new concepts without ripping out the wiring that already works. Then you've got Sanjay Lal. His impact shows up on the field. Quentin Johnston's development since 2024 didn't just happen. Ladd McConkey's explosive rookie campaign didn't come out of nowhere either. Lal's track record with young receivers is exactly what the Chargers need, especially with rookie wideouts Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith showing flashes late last season. That's your pipeline. That's your future production. The staff isn't fully finalized yet, though. Some of the overhaul has already been talked about. Adam Gase is joining the offensive staff in some capacity. Western Michigan's Sean Spence is expected to be the ILB's coach after Navarro Bowman's departure. New assistants are being brought in, like former Steelers OLB's coach Denzel Martin. There's also the expectation that new OL coach Butch Barry will join the mix. Max McCaffrey is being floated as another name coming from Miami with McDaniel in some role. Running backs coach has been speculated, and there are still question marks. Tight ends coach Andy Bischoff is a name to watch, and RB's coach Keel McDonald's status is still in limbo. Chris O'Leary's defensive staff also has choices to make about which 2025 assistants to keep. All of this is happening with the calendar moving fast. The NFL Combine next week, then free agency in March. And there are roster decisions looming too. Potential cut candidates like R.G. Mekhi Becton, T.E. Will Dissly, and C. Bradley Bozeman. Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh are going to be busy balancing the present and the future at the same time. And that brings us right back to the point that ties all of this together. The extra draft pick angle shows planning. The Crosby talk shows ambition. The A.J. Brown concept shows a willingness to push offense into a different tier for Herbert. And keeping key coaches shows the Chargers aren't rebuilding from scratch. They're recalibrating, keeping what works while upgrading around it. Remember what I teased at the top? This isn't one isolated move. It feels like a plan, a real plan, to turn potential into consistent control. So I'll ask you straight, would you go all in right now? Drop your take in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and stay ready, because the next step could be the one that surprises the entire league.